Hey, I'm Luke, and today we're talking about Tender is the Flesh by Agustina Bazterrica, translated by Sarah Moses. Incredible book. If you know anything about it, you know it's kind of near future dystopia where humans are the meat, where there's no longer any animal meat, but there's still a thriving meat industry. The main thing I think anyone that knows about the book knows about it is it's very, very grotesque. It's disgusting. There's a lot of cannibalism. There's a fair bit of there's cruelty to animals. It's a grotesque and disturbing book that is specifically about the meat industry. Well, it's not just about the meat industry. It's about a couple of things, but we're going to get to that in a minute. Before we do, though, I just want to warn you, I'm going to have to spoil the book in order to talk about it. If you haven't read it yet and it's on your list, or if I've made it sound interesting by talking about how disturbing it is, I really would recommend you go read it before watching any reviews about it. This is the sort of book where talking about it too much before reading it is going to ruin it for you. You don't want to have the book spoiled. So if this is on your list or if it's being added to your list now, I would stop watching right now and come back later. I would warn you, if you're going to read it, it is fairly disturbing. Again, cannibalism, cruelty to animals. If those things bother you, I would stay away. If, on the other hand, you're a thrill seeker looking for grotesque fiction for the sake of things being disturbing, you'll find that in here. I don't want to dissuade you from reading it, but it's not, you're really going to be kind of cheating yourself if you go into the book just thinking that. That's really the case with most disturbing fiction, is if it's good, it's disturbing to make a point. It's disturbing on purpose. And that's very much the case here. It's not shocking for the sake of being shocking. It's shocking because it has to be shocking in order to make the points that it makes. If you're going to read this, I would really go into it not just skimming for the next bit of body horror, but really paying close attention to character motivations, why characters are doing, saying, and thinking the things that they are, and when people are being honest, not just with each other, but with themselves. Use your own judgment for everything that's happening in here, and consider when your judgment does not align with other characters' judgment. That's all I want to say, or else I'm going to wind up accidentally spoiling or ruining the book. So at this point, I think we're good to keep talking about it with spoilers, right? All right. Oh, I should also mention, if you're a regular viewer of the channel, and I haven't made a video in a long while. A lot of things have happened since my last video, and I don't want to talk about it today. I just don't. I don't want to get into why. I just don't want to get into it. So today, I really want to talk about this book, Tender is the Flesh. I'm excited to talk about this. We're going to talk about this, and I'll talk about other things, maybe some other time. I don't have a schedule for you, but let's get into the meat of this book. In addition to just liking the book a lot, the other reason I want to talk about it is because I looked at a bunch of reviews for the book, and which is something I always do before I want to talk about a book, make a video about it, or review something, is I want to see, do I have anything to say that others haven't said? Am I missing anything really, really glaring? And as a general statement, I actually think the book really isn't very opaque. Other readers have mostly picked up on the themes in here. It's about the meat industry, yes, but it's not just about the meat industry. It's about a lot more than that. It's about the normalization of anything, of even horrifying things, via language, social ritual, culture, and government. It is also about the meat industry as well. There's layers to this book, and they all are important. Focusing on one to the exception of the others is a mistake in whatever direction you go in that. But one thing that really stuck out to me in a lot of the reviews that I read is it was always kind of tongue-in-cheek, so I don't want to take it too seriously, but there's this sort of sense of, wow, after reading this book, I didn't eat meat for 3 months, or don't eat it before supper. Just this kind of notion of like, oh, this book is going to disgust you and it's going to make you not want to eat meat, but don't worry, that's temporary, you'll get over it. Which is just a perfect condensation of the entire point of the book. To read Tender is the Flesh and come away from it seeing it as a temporary experience, that we dabbled in the aesthetic enjoyment of being disgusted for a little while, and then we got back to being normal. That's like exactly what the book is talking about. So it's bizarre to me to see that in different reviews. So it's essentially the same arc that our main character, Marcos, has with this. He has this little brief glimpse of how awful things are, but really doesn't choose to engage with it in a sincere way. He doesn't consider it as something that he might actually want to change for. It's really more of just a phase he's going toward. I guess I should talk a little bit about Marcos' story. So Marcos is a very interesting character, not because he's a good person or really even like interesting as a human being, it's really more the prose, the way he's portrayed. The prose in this is really, really good in a way that I think is very nuanced. It's kind of hard to tell. Just the language is very distant. Here's a good example of what I'm talking about. Just from the very first page. He goes to the refrigerator and pours himself cold water. He drinks it slowly. His brain warns him that there are words that cover up the world. It's always, and it's called attention to very explicitly in the text. He is noticing this, that the words we choose to describe things color them. They editorialize them. And thus the prose in here is very uneditorialized. It's he did this, he did that, the man did this, the man did this. It's very distant, which allows the reader to really make up their own mind about what's happening. That's where we see the real essential trick of the book. The thing that I think makes it incredibly interesting is this whole story. We have a relationship between Marcos and Jasmine, this human female non-person, this breeding human that's been given to him as a gift. The whole book, it's really hard to tell how he sees her. Does he see her as meat, as property, as a pet, or as a woman? And it's really hard to tell. Like, even when he sees her as a woman, it's hard to tell whether he's anthropomorphizing her or if he's sincerely seeing her as a human woman. This is a woman who has never had a name, has never learned any language. She is an animal in every respect. She is not a human being in the ways that we would talk about being a human being. She's been deprived of all culture. When he treats her like a human being, is he anthropomorphizing her? This comes to a head at the very end of the book, the very last line. She had the human look of a domesticated animal. That line applies better to Marcos than it does to her. He's really what pulls us through the story. He is an insider of the meat industry. He pushes up against essentially every major part of the meat industry. So just watching him with his job, we're able to watch him walk through all the edges of this horrifying society. That's really the horror show here. It feels almost like a theme park horror show where we're just along for the ride as he just tours the meat industry and sees how awful everything is. The whole while, he is undergoing this personal story, which is really his narrative. And I think it's a mistake for us and him to read any of what's happening with the meat industry in here, with this cannibalism, as being really part of his story. The real story Marcos has is he tried very hard with his wife to have a child. They finally had a child, and that child died in its sleep. And now he's estranged from his wife. He had a family. He had all this pride from that. He had a position. He was a man with a good job. He had many friends. He was a good provider. He was building this life, and it all fell apart. We see him in the midst of a depression, maybe a bit of a midlife crisis as well, where we want to read in ethical condemnation, that this is a man who's seen how horrifying things are. It's not what's happening. And the other characters, I think, make that fairly clear. All of his friends are worried about him. He's withdrawn. He hasn't had a barbecue in a long time. Does he even eat meat anymore? He used to be a big meat eater. Why doesn't he eat meat anymore? He works in the meat industry. He was very proud of his job. He's been letting his work slip lately. He hasn't been calling his wife as often anymore. She's recognized that. He's having problems with his sister. He keeps seeing her as a hypocrite. I'm not saying he's necessarily wrong. A lot of these people do have flaws. He's correct about it. But this is the behavior of a depressed person who's lashing out at everyone else around them. He's seeing conspiracy theories in the government, and perhaps there are real conspiracies there. Or perhaps he's had control of his life taken from him by forces outside of his control, and now he's kind of just pointing at everyone he interacts with and seeing how they're not professional, they're not ethical, they're hypocrites, they're doing things wrong, not like he is. That's his criticism of the meat industry. He's appalled at people who are breaking regulations, people who are taking it too far. A number of humans are destroyed during a shipment because they were improperly stored. And Marcos is appalled by this. It's unprofessional and it hurts profit. The whole book, you're kind of dancing between like, well, is it just that? Is he just depressed? Or is there something really real happening here? Is he actually awakened to this? And Jasmine is really the part that pulls it together. And he doesn't know what to do with her. It actually has the rough outline of kind of a romance story. The entire relationship with Jasmine reminded me strongly of like Tamlin and Farah told from Tamlin's perspective in A Court of Thorns and Roses. We have this human man is taking in this kind of wild, lesser girl, and seeing that, well, at first he doesn't really want anything to do with her, and she's just a problem for him. Very standard romance opening. He doesn't see any possibility of anything going more than that. But then, he cleans her up and notices that, well, she is kind of attractive and there's sort of a sweetness, and, it kind of reminds him of his dogs, and he liked having dogs. And again, you kind of have to try, like, the pros did a better job of it than I'm doing right now. It's very easy to get confused over whether this is starting to turn into a romance or if it isn't a romance, when the reality is that this is not a human woman that he's having this sexual relationship with, not as he sees her. She's either a slave or she's human cattle. If she was a pig, he'd be the pig. If she was a human, then he's his slave. She doesn't have a ton. She can't communicate. She's never been taught language. So this entire romance is from the very beginning very disgusting. Yet we're seeing it from his perspective, and with this detached prose where it's really hard to tell how he sees it, how anyone else would see it. All we know for sure is that it is very illegal. If he gets caught doing this, he'll be literally eaten. He's worried about being caught, but it's very hard to tell. Why is he worried about being caught? Is he worried about protecting his new family? Or is this just a diversion? Or is he just using her to produce a child to replace the one that was missing? Which is, in the ending of the book, the way he goes with. That's the very end. He's impregnated Jasmine. Jasmine gives birth. His wife is there and is part of it. She's helping to deliver the baby. And then as soon as it's done, he instantly kills Jasmine and starts dragging her outside to carve her up for a barbecue. And that's where he says the line, she had the human look of a domesticated animal. His wife actually asked him not to kill her because she could provide them more children. Neither of them see this woman as anything more than an animal. To the extent that he ever did see her as more than an animal, he was anthropomorphizing her. To the extent that we saw Marcos as being like us, we were anthropomorphizing him. He has the human look of a domesticated animal. We are reading our human ethics into Marcos when we're seeing his aversion to what's happening around him and reading our reasons for being disgusted by it into his behavior, when in reality, there are other causes for it. It's no different from reading affection into a lizard who might merely want warmth, and that's why it's cuddling up with you. It's interesting to have that. It happens on so many levels within this book, but the main one really is with Marcos himself, that we read him as being like us. He is not like us. And the real horror of this is that he's not different from us because we are different animals. And the same way that he is not different from Jasmine because they are different animals. He is different from Jasmine because they have been socialized differently. And we are different from Marcos because we have been socialized differently. That is the real horror of this book. It's not the cannibalism. It's how fluid our definition of human is. And that I found to be very moving and powerful. So for Marcos, he had this brief sort of experience where he started to kind of look critically at this world that he lives in before eventually returning to normalcy. His story is essentially a happy ending. He starts off the story depressed. His family's broken up. He's withdrawing from his friends. He doesn't care about his job anymore. By the end of the story, he is getting ready to cook up some more meat. Presumably, he's okay with the meat industry again. He's probably okay with his work again. He has his wife back. He has a child back. Everything has been fixed for him. And it's very clear from the ending that this whole experience with being horrified by the meat industry, that is behind him. It was all part of this phase. And that's something that I saw in some of the other reviews of this book. That tongue-in-cheek comment towards the end of a bunch of reviews I saw about how, I was a vegetarian for, a couple of months after reading this. If you have that emotional response to something, you should interrogate that. Don't just let it be a phase. I'm not saying this book should convert you to being vegetarian or vegan. I'm saying that if you have an emotional response to it, don't just let it be temporary, like Marcos did. That's, I think, a criticism we can make of him, is that he is given a glimpse into how bad things are. He's not unaware. He's aware on a very deep level. He touches up on every aspect of this with his work. He thinks about it very clearly, and he even breached boundaries with it at home. And despite all of that, he puts it all behind him and goes back to being normal. It's very easy to do that, to go back to being normal, to rejoin society. And we should try to do better than that, right? Like, if this is disgusting, think about it. Why is it disgusting? I mean, because it's the meat industry. It's the meat industry, but with people. Something that I think comes across very strongly in the book is that even when you adjust for we're eating people, even when you accept, all right, this is a cannibalist book, it's superfluously cruel. It doesn't need to be as cruel as it is in order to get the meat. It's maximizing efficiency at all costs. If it's more efficient to have earthen vessels with no arms and legs, with no tons, who can do nothing but just create human children, then that's what we're going to do. If it's more efficient to keep them all in one place, if it's more efficient to transport them in a way where some die just due to the conditions of transportation, then, well, so long as it doesn't cut into profits or make anyone look bad, what's the problem with that? These are criticisms of the meat industry today. I mean, you can, when you're at the grocery store, you can look at like different types of eggs to see, were these eggs laid by chickens that are ever allowed to go outside, or are these laid by chickens that literally never leave the box and the crate in the warehouse they're in? It's fraught to figure out exactly what means what, and there's huge markups for it, and it's not all, like, it's a really rough system. And it's really telling to me that nowhere on the exterior of this copy of the book that I have, and really not anywhere inside of it either, is there any real discussion about the possibility of just not eating meat, of just going vegetarian. It's essentially treated as a non-starter. It's not realistic. I'm glad for that for the book, by the way. I think that's a very deliberate choice for the book. I don't think that was an oversight, but that's something that's very strange. Like I've been a vegetarian, I think about 6 years now. That's one of the weirdest things about being a vegetarian is when you talk to people about it, they act like people are very ready to, just as Marco's friends inside here are, to figure out what the real problem is. There's often insinuation that it's not about eating cute things. You know, well, sure, you don't want to eat cows and pigs because cows and pigs can be kind of cute, but what about fish or like shrimp? Surely shrimp are okay. Meanwhile, I'm sitting here thinking, I'm not even sure how I feel about silkworms. You know, they have to kill the pupa in order to get the silk, right? I mean, they're bugs, but I don't know. Is that ethical? Like, I'm sitting here having this ethical discussion with myself about what I'm trying to do, and other people often will treat it as just like, oh, well, you're doing that. It must be your wife making you be vegetarian. No, that was my idea. When I became vegetarian, it was in response to a specific trauma. I've been thinking about it for years, but I didn't actually make the decision to actually change until after my ferrets died. And I found out I just no longer had any appetite for death. For me, that was a lasting change. But I can understand how people could look at something like that and just say, well, it's been, about 6 years, but there's still time to go back to being normal, to it's a nice attempt, but it's really too hard. How are you going to stay strong? How do you stay healthy? There's often this like assumption that being vegetarian is incredibly unhealthy, that nutrition experts do not agree with, by the way. This insinuation that, like, in order to be a man and a strong man, you have to eat a lot of meat. And I mean, I'm not the strongest man in the world, but like, I don't know. I don't feel like meat is as required as people seem to think it is. It's a little silly how people talk about it. I think it was interesting to see that kind of brought out in here as well. To the extent where that's the other thing I want to talk about with other reviews is a lot of people, while talking about this book, wanted to go right past the discussion of the meat industry and talk about how this is actually an allegory. It's not about the meat industry really at all. That's just a sample. This is just a jumping off point for the conversation. It could have been anything really. And no, it's about the meat industry too. I mean, don't get me wrong. It's also about the normalization of atrocity through governments and social rituals and language, that if we use the right language to talk about something, then we can make it okay. If it's what everybody does, if it's at the store, if you can buy something at a store, then it must be safe and okay to have, because otherwise the government would prevent it. If everyone for their coming of age ceremony has to have a cookout, then you'd be a bad parent not to have a cookout, right? Would you really want to deprive there's all these little social forces making it seem normal. And I'm not trying to put that completely on blast here, but this is a really good picture of what it sometimes feels like, of just saying like, wow, it's you can just eat different food. In 2025, you're not eating meat because you have to eat meat. For most people, there's certain dietaries and there's edge cases for everything. But for the majority of people, you don't have to eat meat. You could eat different food. It is a matter of convenience and of pleasure to eat meat. I'm not trying to judge anyone for that, but it is kind of telling sometimes how if you try to talk about that with anyone, people do get uncomfortable and they do hide in sort of normalcy and in language. It's frustrating because it can sometimes feel like this book really did remind me of what it's like to talk to people about eating meat sometimes, that it's just like, and the people reviewing it, really, it actually kind of pisses me off when people are like, here's a book that really just describes the meat industry, but what if we tried to empathize a little bit with the animals being eaten? And so many reviewers were ready to say, well, this has nothing to do with meat, and I'm not going to change anything there. I didn't learn anything about being kinder to animals. This is really about capitalism. I saw that in so many different reviews, and it's just, sure, it's also about capitalism. It's also, for the record, strongly about feminism. Marcos has a woman, a slave woman that he uses for breeding purposes and then kills her as soon as he no longer has a purpose for her. Like, this is absolutely also a feminist work as well. A lot of the meat eating is tied up with masculinity, the spirituality and honor in eating meat. We see that with the hunters talking about how it's the spiritual connection. You're absorbing strength from what you've eaten, and it strengthens you. And when you like this whole kind of, I don't know, just macho bullshit to feel good about, again, a pleasure, a luxury, a convenience. It always kind of amuses me when I see men talking about something being masculine because of how like rugged and powerful and spiritual it is, when in reality it's just a luxury activity. In my mind, it is not an especially masculine characteristic to need to eat expensive luxury food every single day, or else you feel like you're going to become feeble and unmasculine. Like that, it always kind of tickles me whenever I see someone talking about meat as this masculine thing, where it's like, okay, what other luxuries have you decided are actually about being masculine? So no, it is about capitalism. It's about feminism. It's about how we use language to normalize horrifying things. It's also very specifically about the meat industry, okay? Like, it is about the meat industry. I feel like Atwood said this kind of the same thing about Handmaid's Tale, that a lot of people read Handmaid's Tale and talked about it as, wow, this is crazy. Things could be like that. Look at how things could be if they spun out of control. And to the extent that The Handmaid's Tale was an exaggeration, it was an exaggeration of scope, not of what's happening. Like that is a real story of things that really take place in real communities in America. It's just not the whole country yet, perhaps. Like that's like, I think there is often a tendency when looking at a story about a very specific thing to pull it out and say, well, it's really about something else. Even if it's very obvious that like, well, it is about that, but don't get rid of the specific example alongside that. It is also about the meat industry. Obviously, it's about the meat industry. That all said, again, there are other aspects to it. This is a really fascinating book. I kind of want to reread it again, actually. There's a lot of angles to it. And I think one of the most interesting scenes of the entire book, probably the one that's going to stick out the longest to me, other than the ending, obviously, is with the hunters when they're all sitting down to eat. And they have a bit where the hunters they're game hunters. They're hunting people. And it's not all people that have never had a first and last name. Some of them are people that have fallen into debt and are being hunted temporarily to have their debts paid off. And if they make it, they make it. And if they don't, then they don't. They're talking about a successful hunt where they've killed a rock star. And they're all sitting, talking, joking about how, if they eat his ton, are they going to gain his singing ability? Again, going back to that power and circle of life and all that. When the man who hunted him has this rock star's penis brought out to him. And one of the other hunters makes a homophobic remark, throws a slur at him because he's putting another man's penis in his mouth. And he explains kind of condescendingly that that's an immature way of looking at it. This is actually an exotic cut of meat, aphrodisiac, will increase his own fertility. There's strength in it. This rock star had a pretty big dick, so he's got a lot of virility in there to be consumed by the man who hunted him. Actually, putting this other man's penis in his mouth is totally normal. It's not gay because the man is dead and he's eating it. That's what makes it okay. And that's just that level where they're completely other. They're not the same as us at all whatsoever. Only here's a man who just before going on there was the same as everyone else. There's no real notion that this was not a human being. They can't even kind of pretend. He was a human being and was stripped of it temporarily as a way to get out of debt. Even on this level, they still have to, they treat him like he's completely other right up until sexuality comes up. Because, oh yeah, no, eating men is perfectly fine. Just, you know, no homo. I'm not really sure what to do with that exactly. I think that's where I think a feminist read of this is very interesting. I think some of the reading of Capitalism is valid as well. But I think there's a lot of angles in which I think you could talk about this book and interpret it in different ways. That it's about the meat industry. It's also about just the way that we cover up atrocity in society by looking the other way or by looking right at it and calling it by something other than what it is. So that's Tender as the Flesh. I obviously liked it a lot. I'm definitely going to reread it at some point. I'll probably give it a little time so I can think about it. Really has got me thinking just quite a lot. I loved it as a vegetarian. Loved it as just a person that loves horrifying, disturbing fiction. Loved the prose as well. Really, really good book. If you do read it, again, what I would ask you is if you have a revulsion to it, if something in here disgusts you, think about it. Don't let it just be a temporary thing. Don't allow it to just be a phase in your life. Look at that. What is disgusting you? Is it something that you should think about long term? Okay, so I'm just about ready to hit publish, and I'm probably overthinking it. I just want to add one little clarifying comment to the end here. That if this is the only video you watch about Tender as the Flesh, then you're not going to get the bit. The video is to a large extent a response to all the other discussion I've seen about it, which is focusing purely on rampant consumerism and capitalism and not talking at all about vegetarianism, veganism, the actual meat industry. And if this is the only video you watch, it is about capitalism and rampant consumerism. That is, if you had to pick one theme that it's about, I would say that. Like, don't go to a discussion group and say, oh, well, I watched a video that explained that it's actually not about capitalism, it's about vegetarianism. It's about both. If you had to pick one, capitalism probably is the stronger, more general theme that people are focusing on. There's a reason why all the other reviews and critics are focusing on that one. I didn't even touch on the reason Marcos is so upset at his sister is because and the reason that he's trapped inside the meat industry still is because he has to support his father, who dies partway through the book. But at the beginning of it, he's at an assisted living facility, a very nice one, and Marcos has to make the money for it. His sister is not contributing, which is why he's angry at her. He has to stay working at this job that he's become disillusioned by in order to support his father, which we could see again as more of this depression, that he's just upset that he has to do it. And because he has to do it, that's why he's upset about it, that it's not really a problem with the meat industry. It's just that he doesn't want to do it. And if he's forced to do it, then he doesn't like it. You can also make I mean, literally, his father needs medicine, needs money for healthcare. And because of that, Marcos has to continue to play a role within this horrifying system. There's no ethical way to leave this system of capitalism and rampant consumerism if you have social connections to other people that are still in it, because then you would be abandoning them. Like, he could just quit and cut all ties with this industry. If he did, he would be abandoning his father to be literally eaten. So this is a system where he has to continue to uphold this whole consumerist culture, or else he is abandoning his father to be literally eaten up by it. Everything else you see inside of the book, everything that they're talking about, everything else I said in here does obviously apply to this capitalist, consumerist society that is being held together, that governments are keeping it running correctly, that people are looking the other way, that the least powerful are chewed up and eaten by it, and those who are spared by it are mostly just trying to look the other way, just trying to live their lives and don't want to think about it. That applies to the meat aspect of it. It also applies to the capitalist consumer. There's a lot going on inside the book. If you're going to talk about it with other people, I do hope that you will bring up the topic of actually eating meat, that this might not just be an analogy for the sake of a larger discussion point, that it's about the analogy and the other point. That said, you will be wrong if you go to a discussion group and say, oh, well, actually, it's not about capitalism, or it's only minimally about capitalism. It's very, very much about rampant consumerism and capitalism. It's just, I'm frustrated at how many people made it just about that and completely ignored that it's also about meat. But all right, let's get this published.